Black Lives Matters. It's the time that we're a part of that conversation. We're a loud voice that say, in Britain, in the 2020, we want to change. We want to stop celebrating those who have brutalised other people, our brothers and sisters in other countries, and we want to start celebrating people who made a positive contribution to humanity. I learned in school about William Wilberforce. I did not learn about Alada Equiano, about countless other black abolitionists. They've been absolutely written out of history. And I say to people who say removing statues is about covering up history, it's absolutely not true. Our history has been distorted. It's been a colonial history. It's time to decolonise that history. It's time to tell a story where black people are written into the piece. I want to hear more about Alada Equiano. I want to hear more about Francis Barber, who lived locally, a freed slave. I want to hear more about Felix Cobson, who made a positive contribution to our community. So in Bishop Stortford, like in Cape Town, like in Oxford, like in Bristol, we're a part of the same movement to bring a positive change.
Cecil Rhodes was a British colonialist and imperialist born here in Bishop Stortford in 1853. During his lifetime, he was a key figure in the development of the British Empire through his work of stealing land from the native people of southern Africa. His dream was for the British, who he viewed as the superior race, to completely dominate the African continent, quoting that he wanted to be able to draw a red line from Cairo to Cape Town, building a railway across the entire continent of Africa without ever leaving British territory. In 1877, in one of his most famous wills, Rhodes declared that we, the British people, are the finest race in the world, and that the more of the world that we inhabit, the better it is for human race. Just imagine those parts that are at present inhabited by the most despicable specimens of human beings, referring to the people of Africa. Africa is still lying ready for us, and it is our duty to take it. Such ludicrous ideology led the path behind his invasion of African territories in the south, and his narcissism led to the creation of the colony of Rhodesia. This colony was stripped of its origin and named after Rhodes himself, after the British brutally suppressed the natives who rebelled against such oppressive colonisation. From 1890 to 1896, Rhodes was made Prime Minister of the Cape Colony, and under his government, the rights of black Africans were effectively restricted by raising the financial qualifications for voting. So to put it lightly, Rhodes was a white supremacist. His belief that the British were the greatest race in the world and that it was the destiny of the British nation to rule over the lands and nations of non-white individuals mirrors that of Adolf Hitler. And I did some research to see if there were any statues or places named after Hitler, and unsurprisingly, there are none. Because history has taught us how bad of a person Hitler was. But when it comes to the horrors of British colonialisation, men like Rhodes are painted as ambitious role models and heroes. The terrible acts that they performed, all in the name of the British Empire, are being brushed under the carpet. Why is that? The UK is not innocent. We are living through a crucial part of history, and the choices that we make during this period will shape the future that our children and our children's children will live through. When they study our past, what will it show? Will they be told of how we knew the true history of Cecil Rhodes and how controversial of a figure he was, how we were aware of his extremist ideology, and how when we had the chance to make a change, we did nothing? This is the narrative that we are creating by not changing the name of the Art Centre immediately. I know to some, changing a name seems ridiculous and even insufficient. It doesn't change the past, but it does shape the future. It shows that we are conscious of the horrors of the past and that we want to do better. That we are not going to put up with the immortalisation of a heinous person through statues, street names, or names of buildings. And it shows that we stand in solidarity with those who have constantly been oppressed throughout history. So rename the Rhodes Centre now.
Whoa! What do we want?
Rhodes must fall!
When do we want it?
Now!
What do we want?
Rhodes must fall!
When do we want it?
Now!
What do we want?
Rhodes must fall!
When do we want it?
Now!
I'm from Stortford Against Rhodes. We are an activist group of local activists and students. I represent the student side. We obviously welcome the fact that the Rhodes name has been ruled out by the Arts Centre. and well, after our campaign. And we recognise and we accept, we welcome the fact that the Trust recognise it as unacceptable to carry the name of a white supremacist, a man who literally called for an Anglo-Saxon master race, who was an architect of apartheid and was admired by Hitler. Okay. And we welcome this change, of course. And nobody can pretend that the problems of racism can be solved only by renaming an art centre. They must be solved by education. They must be solved by education to ensure that the crimes of Rhodes, the crimes of his ideology and his actions are never repeated. This campaign of education, we want the Rhodes Centre to be part of that local community discussion. But we've heard nothing. A lack of willingness to engage with us. They say that this decision about a name change has been going on for 18 months, and yet why haven't we heard anything for 18 months? We want them to be part of this local community discussion that has seen schools acknowledging this need for education on race issues, with diversity and inclusivity across the curriculum, looking at how the topics of empire and slavery are taught, and how we can change them. The most common accusation we at Stortford Against Rhodes receive on our Facebook pages, which you should like, are that we want to rewrite history. No, we don't. We want to accept our history. We want to learn from it. We cannot be confined to the figures of our racist past, like Rhodes. We want to learn. That is why education is so important. And it's so important that the Arts Centre hasn't accepted that campaign for education. On the name, whether it is the excellent suggestions of Felix Cobson or Francis Barber, the 1700s ex-slave who lived in Bishop Stortford and was the assistant and heir to Samuel Johnson, the inventor of the dictionary. Whether it is these people or any other name, we want to see an appropriate name after a community consultation. But most of all, we want to see that campaign of education, because there is a long way to go before racism is extinguished in our society, and we must all play a part in that. Thank you.
Bro!
My name's Freya and I'm a member of Stortford Against Rhodes, and I'm also a local community activist fighting for social and climate justice. Today I wanted to talk about the importance of renaming the Rhodes Centre. The naysayers have plenty of excuses, and I'm sure that there's a lot of naysayers in this town, that what an art centre is called, that what we call an art centre is unimportant in the grand scheme of things, that the past is irrelevant and that we should focus on the present, that we're seeking to erase history as in a 1984-esque dystopia. And whilst I do agree that, we really do need to prioritise fighting with the Black Lives Matter movement and anti-racist movements to fight the racism and systemic oppression of black people that they face on a daily basis, rewriting the historical narrative of celebrating our country's colonialisers is also incredibly important. Growing up in school, we were taught so many times about 1066, the glory of World War II and the making of the British Empire. Yet we learnt nothing about the history of other cultures, the slaughter of millions of people under the Empire. Instead, we were told, oh, it's all fine, we taught them English, wow, that's really going to help them. Or how the UK government was still paying money to the descendants of ex-slave owners as late as 2015. It is no wonder that this one-sided narrative of history we are fed through the education system and the media has become ingrained within our society. 80% of black Britons still think that the UK is very racist. Calling for the centre to be renamed is calling for our history to be addressed, recognising that the damage of Cecil Rhodes' imperialism and enrichment caused to the people that he colonised was impermissible. It's not calling for history to be erased, but exploring for people to be able to explore history in a way that is less black and white than the narrative that we are fed, that allows people to learn of the truth of Cecil Rhodes' action in a setting that doesn't glorify him as the pride of Bishop Stortford. It sends a message to our ethnic minority communities that we do not stand with racism. I firmly believe that in order to create the much needed change that we need to see in society, we have to learn from our past. We're living in a world of immense challenges, a global pandemic, widening inequality, the climate emergency. In readdressing how we look at colonialism and racism and and how we interact with our past. We no longer encourage people to reassess the past, but to reconsider the present. Why is it permissible that wealthy nations continue to spew billions of tons of carbon into the atmosphere with little regard for predominantly black and brown communities most at risk from climate change in the global south? Why is it permissible that our global financial system continues to allow the exploitation of global south countries through unsustainable debt levels and chain dependence on the West? These are critical questions that we must continue to educate our local community about, and we must fight for people to come together to address and to push for wide-scale societal change, learning from the atrocities of the past to create a better future for everyone.
Whoa!
Okay, from the other speakers, we've heard that we're agreed that the name should be changed, and we need to decide what to put in its place. Okay, Stand Up to Racism Harlow has a suggestion. For me, it's a personal suggestion. It doesn't have to be this name. We know there are other possibilities, but we feel it should be a black person and a person who's made some sort of contribution to the area. And this is a very appropriate suggestion because Felix Cobson made an enormous contribution to the arts, and he's recognised for that. There are films about him held by the British Film Institute. I was taught by him in Harlow, but he lived locally. He set up an African village in nearby Takeley called Decolonise. He taught me about Mill School in Harlow in the 1960s. I mean, I feel in some ways that we've actually progressed in anti-racism, but in other ways we've gone backwards, because we heard about the importance from the Stortford Against Rhodes speaks about the importance of education. And for me, in the 1960s, in the liberal 1960s, I actually had a good multicultural education. Felix Cobson came to Burnt Mill School and he taught me art, more specifically textiles. I learned about fabric printing, screen printing, using dyes, wax resist, batik. He came originally from Ghana and he wanted to educate children about African culture, about art, music, dance, all the arts. He ran workshops in local schools and at the centre that he created around his home of the old vicarage in Takeley. The centre was created as an African village, as I've said, a Cloa, where people could learn about arts and culture from Mr. Cobson's native Ghana. He wanted to dispel ignorant ideas that some children held about Africa, but he did that in a non-judgmental, gentle and sensitive way. This was true multicultural education, and as I've said, there are films that can be accessed online at the BFI, the British Film Institute, videos which include an interview with Felix Cobson and his workshops, both in local schools and in the African village. If we say that Black Lives Matter, then I suggest that we take the life of a black person with local connections who made a great contribution to education, the arts, and to the furtherance of understanding between people of different backgrounds. It's just my suggestion. I know that the council is considering a change of name. It needs to happen sooner rather than later. As has already been said, the name of Rhodes could easily be taken off it has been taken off today. But I don't think they're just settling for the Bishop Stortford Arts Centre or something like that, which is what they want to do in the future, next year sometime. That would not be going far enough in recognising the wrong. They need to make some sort of reparation for the offence that they have caused to people over the years. And something bland like that would not be going far enough in recognising the wrong, in using the name of Rhodes as it has been. And I think in addition to renaming the arts complex, the council should also consider renaming the roads around here, which draw on the racist, imperialist history that Tanya talked about.
Thank you very much, Jan. I want to say again what an absolute key moment this is. Whether it be in Britain, whether it be in the United States, in Belgium, in France, where Black Lives Matter protests are happening, we're at a key moment to decide about our future and where's next. There's too many people who will have us living, celebrating figures like Rhodes, like Coulson, like John Cash. It's absolutely crucial that we stand up and argue for a true reflection of history, actually the horrors that these people brought upon our brothers and sisters in Africa, but the oppression they caused the white community here as well often. What we absolutely have to say is we want a multicultural education that reflects Britain in the 21st century. We want figures like Colson, we want to hear about Barber, we want to hear about William Guthrie, Olada Equiano and countless other black people, Mary Seacole, who made a contribution to Britain and made a contribution across the world to making this country a more habitable place. So I think it's absolutely crucial that we continue to protest, that we continue to sign petitions, that we continue to fight in our schools, in our colleges, in our university, to decolonise education. It starts with a road centre. We saw in Cape Town change was possible there with Rhodes statue being removed at the university. Now Oxford has followed after dragging their feet. In Bristol, our brothers and sisters, the protesters, took actions into their own hand, and we absolutely support them.
Hooray!
We want to decolonise Britain, every statue and every name change at a time to reflect the multicultural nature of Britain that we should all celebrate. If anyone else wants to speak now, it's open mic. Please do come and make a contribution now, and let's continue the chanting.
I'd just like to say on the topic of the name change, we've been told that we'll have to wait a year. I'd like to ask why. It's not going to take a long time to change your website. We've changed the sign for you. It only took us a few minutes. I don't see why we have to wait a year before we get this done. This is not a controversial position to want the name to be changed. The man being celebrated on this building is an infamous racist, a colonist, one of the worst people you can imagine for British history. Someone we should not by any means be honouring with buildings, with statues. His name belongs in museums, not out here. Everyone knows this full well. They know this, otherwise they would have fought us when we said change it. You've already agreed to change it. You know what needs to be done. So stop being stubborn, stop stalling, get on with the change.
Hooray!
Fantastic. Pete from Harlow South Racing.
Hi, yeah. Harlow Trades Council as well, trade unionist, housing campaign for many years, will remind us about Grenfell, that an absolute disaster, an injustice that should never have happened. In fact, 72 lives there, and only 70% of the people in there were black and ethnic minority people, not actually cared about or even listened to. And for the rest of housing around this country for the last 40 years, the black and ethnic minorities are still living in the worst housing conditions. That needs to change as well. Remember Grenfell, that's another thing to fight for.
Hooray!
Cops on Barber on their list.
Not a white supremacist!